Network redundancy and how you configure your network is extremely important in any business, in any infrastructure configuration that you may have. You've got your server components, making sure that your servers are redundant, making sure that all of that is all redundant. But if your network is poorly set up and your physical connections, your physical infrastructure is poorly set up and not with high availability thought of beforehand, you're going to have problems as devices or links or even worse, sites go down. You have to invoke disaster recovery. So making sure that your network is configured with redundancy and high availability is of utmost importance. So we start off with your physical infrastructure. We're talking about firewalls, we're talking about switches, we're talking about routers and other network components. Always look at redundancy at the forefront of your mind whenever you are procuring any of these pieces of infrastructure. My general rule is, as we said, we always buy two of everything. So if you are looking at getting a firewall, buy a firewall for your primary, a firewall for your secondary. If your primary firewall goes down, your firewall controls all of your, your security coming in and out of your network. If that goes down, you've potentially lost your network. The same deal with your switches. If you've got your core switches, if you've got switches, that all of your computers and your servers and your phones and everything are all running into, if they're all running into one switch and your switch goes down, you've lost access to your network for most of your infrastructure, most of your workstations and your servers in your infrastructure. So always think about not only procuring them in pairs or in groups of multiple switches, but think about how you're going to design it. Think about how you're going to design your VLANs across your switches. Have VLANs spread between your switches. If you have a server itself should be procured with one or more network cards with multiple points. I'd have one of those network points at the back of a server running into one switch and the other point running into a different switch. So if one of my switches goes down, the server can still communicate to an alternate switch and then out to my firewall, out to my router, and then out onto out to the internet or an alternate site. So always doing everything in pairs is of utmost importance. So your network device should also have two power supplies built in. So not only one, so that if one power goes down, you've lost your entire switch or firewall, but have two, one on each side, so that if one goes down, your switch or your firewall can still be operational. My general recommendation is to always have at least two internet connections. One is your primary and one is a secondary. You could have them both active, or you could have one active and the other one passive, and just sitting there passively. The reason for this is if your primary interconnection goes down, you can switch over to a second one. It's always important to have one there set up as redundancy in case the primary one does go down for whatever reason. That could be your router going down, your router that's been provided by your ISP. If your ISP goes down, look at perhaps your second link being with a different carrier. So you can have what's called carrier diversity. So you don't have both internet links running out to the same service provider. You have one going into one service provider, one going out into a second service provider. If we're talking about links, we're also talking about potentially links going out to different services, going out to different sites, into different offices, perhaps into customer locations. Looking at setting everything up with two links at least. If I've got site A as my head office, as my core office, and then I've got site B, which could be a remote office, have the link between site A and site B set up with two connections. Again, they don't have to both be active. You can have one as your primary link, which is a faster bandwidth, faster performance, and have a secondary link set up as a failover. So that if your primary link does go down, you've got a secondary link there to back it up. Because the worst thing that you want to happen is that one of those links goes down. If you have a single link, that link goes down, you could potentially lose access to that office. That secondary link could be set up in a multiple set of ways. You can have a VPN connection, you can have a direct connection, you could be going via an MPLS, whatever that may be, but making sure that you've at least got two redundant links between all of your sites. If you've got connection into particular cloud services, outside of your internet, for example, perhaps to a backup service out on the cloud, perhaps to a cloud-based infrastructure such as AWS or Azure, have two links. Your primary goes down, your secondary can kick in and still be operational. Make sure that the routing protocols that you decide to use between all of your connections is the correct routing protocol to use. Things such as EIGRP, RIP, BGP, whatever their connection will be. Each of these protocols will have different redundancy built in, will have different smarts built in on the background to understand how your network is functioning, understand your different IP addresses, your different routes, how everything's sort of functioning through your network. So it's very important to think about how you're going to architect your network between sites so that you do have redundancy and high availability thought out and planned before you actually configure your network. Think about perhaps your routers as well. We mentioned having dual internet connections, dual links between your sites. Nowadays there are a lot of routers that can also incorporate 2 connections built into the one router. Perhaps one connection is a physical Ethernet NIC connection, right, going out to a particular service, and the other one could be connected to a 4G service. A router could have a 4G SIM built in to the actual unit, that if the primary goes down, you can still connect to a service over a 4G. So you can actually now have redundancy built into the actual single unit also.